Have you noticed on the bookshelves just how many more South African books there are on the shelves of exclusive books? And have you noticed, in response to growing demand for literature works from outside the country, that we're seeing more and more Pan-African authors coming to the fore? Benjamin Trisk is the chief executive of Exclusive Books, and this is not a bad catalogue, Benjamin Trisk. I mean,
not bad. It's a brilliant one.
How many titles have you got in here?
250.
And how many are non-South African authors?
I would say that 80% are non-South African.
And where have you
At least.
Where have you sourced the authors
Across
from?
the continent.
But how do you do that?
We look at huge catalogues of reference material. We get feeds from all the publishers, all the wholesalers around the world, and we do it on a daily basis.
Okay.
So we know what's coming.
Where are these books being published? I mean, if you're looking for works from Nigeria, from Cameroon, from Senegal, from Kenya, from Tanzania, have they got local publishers?
No. So you have local publishers for South African books. But then you have something called the international publisher, Penguin Random House, for instance. Now, Penguin Random House in the States is the publisher of Chimamanda Adichie. So the office here will bring the books in. What we've done is to put these books from many, many different authors together in one catalogue. But here's an interesting point. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who is the great Kenyan writer, who refuses to write in English, language of the oppressor and colonialists. So he writes either in Swahili or his own native dialect. I can't bring those books here, but fortunately there are major publishers who know his work, who publish him in English, and so we have them here.
So he doesn't object to his work being translated into English?
Doesn't object to his work being translated.
But won't write it in English. Okay. I mean, there are really interesting nuances about publishing them across this continent and the work that comes across this continent. Is this the most comprehensive guide to African literature?
As far as I know, it is. And I'll tell you something. We've just had the Franschhoek Literary Festival this weekend. Deborah Lipstadt, the eminent historian from Emory in Atlanta, was there. She took a copy back. Philippe Sands, who won the Bailey Gifford Prize in 2016, has asked me to post him a copy. We're getting requests from South African universities for this catalogue because they want to introduce black writing courses, and they need to look at where the material is. And this is not only Africa by country, but it's also Pan-Africa. So it is the Caribbean, it's North America, it's other places.
So what is the reason for the timing of this? Because I mean, these writers have been around for decades. Many of them. They've been writing for a long time. Has there been no market? Have you thought there's been no market? Or is you simply feeding a market that is going, we want this and you're not supplying it?
Yes. So we've had the sense for the past 18 months that there is a hunger for this literature. And we have developed it. And just to give you an idea, I was looking at the figures this morning across all our stores. If I look at the first 4 months of this year so far against the first 4 months of last year, we are up about 60%.
60% in terms of African authors being sold through Exclusive Books
African fiction.
African fiction.
In the main, African fiction. 60%. From a big number, from a big base, we're up 60%.
I mean, and this is a new market for you. What was the delay? I mean, this market has been here. We've had black people calling for more African authors through universities. I mean, you would have heard the Cries and the Fees Must Fall campaign last year, saying, why must we be reading colonial literature when this continent is rich with stories and rich with lessons?
So I bought the business with my shareholders 3.5 years ago. And for 18 months, the Luddite in me was focused on just fixing the business. The last 18 months, we've been able to do things like this. And I'll tell you something really interesting. I've refurbished a lot of our stores. They're at a different level, almost to anything in the world. Go anywhere you like and take a look at bookshops.
Well, you can't find bookshops anymore, really.
No, you can. But wherever I've redone a bookshop, wherever I've introduced the colour and the language of South Africa into the actual architecture, interior architecture, the change in the demographic in that store shifts so dramatically, I have been open-mouthed.
Now, I mean, I suppose there's an element of art to it, and it's the look and feel of the stores, but it's also what is carried on the shelves will draw a market. If you put Afrikaans titles onto a shelf, it will draw more Afrikaans people to a store. Let's say, for example, and I run the risk of being accused of being stereotypical, but let's say in Pretoria, for example, if I look at Pretoria, the Centurion Mall might have a stronger Afrikaans element there, but more and more black South Africans are going into bookshops because the material is there, the shops are welcoming, and people feel like there's actually a space in which I'm comfortable.
So the new stores are all a hangout, Bruce. I mean, it's not just going there to buy books. You go there to have coffee, to meet other people, just to enjoy the experience. Lots of people come to those huge tables in the Hyde Park shop. They work. They have meetings. I once interrupted a board meeting, by the way, and they just enjoy the space. They don't necessarily buy anything at that point. And my view is this: I don't care whether people buy or not, because when they want to buy a book, where will they come? They'll come where they've had a good experience.
10 years ago, books were supposed to be on their way out.
Absolutely.
They were dying.
Yeah.
I mean, are you seeing year-on-year growth in the sale of physical books across all genres?
Why would I have bought the business?
I thought you were a bit crazy. I mean, as Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, as they do, and I was recently at their gathering in Omaha, and Warren Buffett recently bought a big stake in Apple, and Charlie Munger said to him, at first I thought you were crazy, and then I thought, perhaps you're learning. I hope it's the latter. Perhaps when people thought you were crazy buying a book business along with Mark Barnes and other investors in the business, people thought you might have been crazy buying into the equivalent of an American railroad, as Warren Buffett has done.
So it was the first thing I had to do with the banks and the suits, was to convince them that books had legs. And we looked very closely at what was happening to the Kindle, sales of the Kindle on the one hand, more importantly, what was happening to electronic book downloads, because those two things go together. And we didn't see growth flattening, but we certainly saw three-digit growth starting to fall. That was in October, November 2013. And that has been replicated now significantly, and the trajectory is getting steeper in reverse.
I mean, and it's also interesting that you're actually growing your footprint of physical stores. You must have, I look at the back of this particular catalogue, they look like between 30 and 40 stores.
We've got 41 stores. Yeah. I've cut back on stores that just weren't meeting the market, but that doesn't mean that I won't go into those areas again with a different kind of offering. It may be that we had stores that didn't do well because we were so Western-centered or Euro-centered that we weren't giving people what they want. If you don't give people what they want, they won't buy from you.
No, completely. Simple. I mean, and that's, I think, in many respects, a great revelation.
Yeah.
So where to from here then? I mean, you had a big fallout, did you not, with the airports company in South Africa? I see here that you still got the Cape Town airport open, you still got domestic and international, you still got OR Tambo, domestic and international. Have you won that battle, by the way? Because they were wanting to evict you.
No, we've won that battle. We went to court with them 4 times.
So that's through every court in the land?
Scoreline is 4-0.
Okay.
The last win that we had was in the Supreme Court, and we had a great judgment from the presiding judge, who was Carol Lewis, and we are now talking, and I believe we'll settle. And the problem with that whole fight was that there were just certain rotten apples in the barrel, and they soured the whole thing. I've dealt with many AXA people who I think are first class. It was just these few people holding on to their territory and making money out of it at the same time.
I mean, there's real concern. I mean, the idea is that exclusive books would disappear in CNA, which the last time I went in, I didn't see too many books. I saw lots of stationery, and I saw lots of gimmicks and gizmos and all of that sort of stuff, some of which you sell, and cell phones. But that was going to be the format that was going to be introduced to the airports. I mean, and that airport market surely is quite an important shop window for you.
It's a great shop window for us. And those airport shops were one of the spurs to this catalogue, because when people come to South Africa, they are looking for these
now,
books.
tell me how the sales, for example, in Hyde Park in Johannesburg or in Claremont in Cape Town, how the sales are different in terms of what you carry versus the international airport outlets at Cape Town and OR Tambo.
So at OR Tambo or Cape Town International, we have a very specific history curation, very specific African fiction and African non-fiction. But a large part of it is books of African interest. Whereas at Cavendish or at Hyde Park, it's a much more Catholic selection. Take what you want.
Okay. But I mean, and that's informing then reading habits. It's informing people who are coming in using South Africa as a hub to travel through. They're spending. They're
Absolutely.
buying African literature.
Absolutely.
Wanting to learn more about this continent rather than buying a Wilbur Smith, as many people might have done 10 or 15 years ago. They're going for an African author telling African stories.
People will buy a Wilbur Smith at the airports. It's throwaway fiction. You don't care whether it's on your shelf in a year's time. But the African fiction is, I think, different. People buy it, they keep it on their shelves.
I see there's no Wilbur Smith in this book.
Not yet.
Not yet. But are his joint ventures working? Because I think I've seen 2 titles in which he's doing a bit like a James Patterson, putting his name on the book, and other people are writing, and he's sort of getting last approvals on it. Is that selling?
I think it's selling. In fact, I mean, I know because we sell so much of it. I know it's selling. But that's not the only. That's not the only example. For instance, Sophie Hannah was commissioned by the Agatha Christie Foundation to write more Agatha Christie's. Agatha Christie's been dead how long?
Yeah, long time.
Nearly 30 years, I think.
Yeah.
But she's writing new novels. I just wish J.K. Rowling would commission somebody to do the next Harry Potter series.
Some fresh ideas. That's
Yes.
what we need. We need a little bit of magic. We need some magic. Benjamin Trisk, nice to see you. Congratulations. Really nice to see some 300 African titles and many African authors getting exposure to the South African market for the first time, but also more of a Pan-African perspective and a global perspective as tourism numbers through big international airports in South Africa grow. More and more people are being exposed to real African literature. Exclusive Books Chief Executive Benjamin Trisk on the Moneymakers this evening. I do hope you have a great book in front of you. Now you can go to that book. Till next time, bye-bye.